All right, everyone, the Supreme Court has taken up a case involving homelessness, actually, within the United States. I'm going to try to do a little bit of nuance here because, again, when you have this sort of situation, nuance tends to be lost. People take up a hardline political position, and so they take one side or the other. They don't think that there's any nuance that can actually be discussed, and if you discuss it at all, they call you a fence-sitter, as though having nuance is a bad thing. I'm going to read a little bit of this verbatim. In the most significant homelessness case to reach the Supreme Court in decades, the justices appear split on what it means to be homeless, whether being homeless is a status, and whether the complicated issue should be decided by the courts at all. The justices heard arguments on Monday on whether cities enforcing public camping bans in the absence of available shelter beds is a violation of the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause. I would say maybe. Again, it's kind of a gray area. A small Oregon city, Grants Pass, brought the case to the High Court after a 2022 ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court prevented the city from enforcing its own anti-camping ordinances, holding that a lack of shelter space makes homelessness an involuntary status. It often is, by the way. That part is fundamentally correct. This court should reverse and end the Ninth Circuit's failed experiment, which has fueled the spread of encampments while harming those it purports to protect. A lawyer for the city, Thane Evangelos, told justices in opening statements on Monday. Critical to Monday's arguments was a Supreme Court ruling in 1962, Robinson v. California, which held that states cannot punish a person for the status of being addicted to drugs, and didn't bar punishment for possession, or for the public use of drugs, or sale, certainly, but that simply the fact that they happen to be an addict, you can't throw them in jail for that, which kind of makes sense. No, you have used heroin in the last month? Well, we're dragging you off to the jail cell. In jail, you'll be able to get more heroin. But if you want drugs, college campus, school, or prison, actually, which is something that most people don't understand. I think it's easier to get drugs from the dude waddling around in the white hoodie in the back alley. You can get drugs from him too, but they are smuggled regularly by various people. Homelessness is a terrible thing, but I wanted to speak to a greater nuance here. We're having, therefore, a legal discourse over whether or not you should be able to dismantle homeless encampments by enforcing ordinances against public camping. And that's specifically what those are geared towards. If you're on your own front lawn and drop a tent, that's private property, and so you're allowed to have a tent. First, to the element of NIMBYism. People concerned about the homeless in this community. If this ordinance is allowed to go through, you can free up some space on your property and say, well, you guys can camp here. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? I would note that most of those people vote for policies that proclaim to help the poor, never do, and actually sometimes make the problem worse. You can always cook for them too, and you can provide them with food. You may not be able to provide for all of them. Why don't some of the upper middle classers in the area get together and say, look, we'll form like a little syndicate to help people that are, less fortunate than us, and they can camp out there and hopefully get help. And there's not a whole lot of resources for people who are down and out, by the way, unfortunately, et cetera, et cetera. Secondly, can we please address the elephant in the room, the root cause of homelessness? Homelessness is generally correlated with mental illness. Well, we've shattered the mental illness treatment system in the United States. It's a joke. Intergenerational poverty, which is often caused by high centralized government policies and bureaucratic regulation, and things like that. Government has caused this problem in part. The migrant crisis is causing a homeless crisis as well. You've got plenty of money freed up for sheltering people that are illegally in the United States, but you don't seem to have enough public funds for people who have been in the United States to begin with. Why don't we address those problems so that there are less homeless people and we can probably compensate for the rest? And I speak as someone who's been a step from homelessness on several different occasions in life. I know what it's like to feel like you're going to be living in a tent, to know what it's like to think you're going to be living under the highway overpass. In this particular climate, by the way, that probably means you fucking die. There isn't enough space and resources in homeless shelters to actually regularly house the homeless. It's all very temporary housing style. It's like, some chick has an abusive boyfriend. She runs off. She goes to the women's shelter. She gets to clean up and have some hot meals and stuff, but it's understood to be very, very temporary. That person has to put in a great deal of effort in order to try to scrap things together themselves. There are, by the way, no men's battered shelters. I think there was one some time ago and it closed down. I don't think there are any currently operating in the United States, if I remember correctly, which is a real shame because there are men that have been abused too, you know. Imagine you're a gay dude. Well, you're up shit creek without a paddle now, aren't you? Yeah. Johnson, my 300-pound bodybuilder boyfriend keeps beating me up, so I left. I need help. Sorry, but I guess they can claim to be transgendered now, so I guess maybe then they can get help. It'd be very helpful for men. I noticed that thing only benefits men, actually. It's very strange. We should be addressing the homeless crisis in a rather comprehensive manner rather than dicking around with this sort of legalese. We shouldn't have a situation where there's a significant enough crisis so that we have to address it through the Supreme Court. It shouldn't exist in the first place. Like Rutland used to have a homeless encampment sort of behind the rail tracks. Now there's two of them. There's the one down by the hospital, last I knew. So now you've got two. The number of people suffering from homelessness in the United States has risen dramatically over the last few years. That's partially the result of shitty economic policies driving people to homelessness. You know, not everyone can find that second job so that they can afford a one-bedroom apartment. Not everyone's capable of finding that. You have a lot of people slipping through the cracks, and I fear that the problem is going to get considerably worse before it gets better. We're capable of addressing it, but public policy never really does. It never wants, and public charity. There are all sorts of people. They'll vote for a little bit more welfare, but they're never going to shelter somebody in their home. We saw this on full display at Martha's Vineyard. Those people are astronomically wealthy. They have homes that are worth, in some cases, $5–10 million, that have like 7 bedrooms. That are empty most of the year, by the way. Some they go there, that's their third home. You know, they've got one in Aspen as well, and probably one in Vermont, ironically. And then they've got their ranch in Texas, but they can't take in a single migrant. They can't take in a single homeless person. Why don't we have a homeless person busing program and send them to Martha's Vineyard? And then force, but by the way, if the Supreme Court rules, yeah, indeed, you can't really enforce these ordinances, they won't be able to do anything about it. The public parks in Martha's Vineyard will be dotted with tents. I think that would be good for the NIMBYs to learn a little bit more charity and diversity because they made those the immigrants sleep in the fucking church. Nobody was willing to take them in on their own private property. I fucking wonder why. These people are the problem. That's about all. Peace out.